1. We're diving into a real gem from the 70s, a 1972 Mercury Montego MX two-door hardtop that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $4,800. Now, I've got to be honest with you, this isn't a perfect showroom piece, but it's got a lot going for it. This classic coupe is rocking a 351 Windsor V8 under the hood, paired with an automatic transmission, and it's still got that factory AC. How cool is that? The seller says it's a good runner and driver, which is music to our ears. They've done some work on the rear end, giving it new 355 gears with a posy and a locker, plus a Ford 9-inch rear end. That's some serious upgrade action right there. Now let's talk about the body. It's described as clean and straight, which is pretty impressive for a car pushing 50 years old, but I've got to keep it real with you. There are a couple of small rust spots starting to show. It's not a deal breaker, but it's something to keep in mind if you're thinking about picking this baby up. The interior is holding up well for its age, still looking presentable. And check this out, it's got new wheels all around and some beefy 295 Cooper Cobra tires in the back. That's going to give you some serious grip. One thing I really appreciate is that the seller's been upfront about the car's condition. They've mentioned that the floor pans and trunk pan are solid, and they've got pics to back it up. That's the kind of transparency we love to see. With only 9,316 miles on the odometer, a clean Washington title, and the fact that these Montegos are getting pretty rare, this could be a sweet ride for the right enthusiast. It's not perfect, but it's got potential written all over it. If you're in the Kennewick, Washington area and looking for a project with good bones, this 72 Montego might just be calling your name. Remember, folks, cars like these are all about the journey. It's not just about owning a classic, it's about the stories you'll create while cruising in this piece of American automotive history. Happy hunting, and keep those engines revving. 2. We're taking a look at a real blast from the past. A 1973 Ford Pinto wagon that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $6,250. Now, I know what you're thinking. A Pinto? Really? But hear me out, because this little wagon might just surprise you. First things first, let's address the elephant in the room. The Pinto doesn't have the best reputation, but this particular example seems to be defying the odds. The seller claims it's rust-free, which is pretty impressive for a car pushing 50 years old. And get this, it's got a clean title in the seller's name, which is always a good sign. Under the hood, we've got a rebuilt original 4-cylinder engine. It might not be a powerhouse, but hey, it's all about the charm with these little guys. Paired with a 4-speed manual transmission, this Pinto wagon is promising a fun, engaging drive. The seller says it runs and drives well, which is music to our ears. Now, let's talk about the interior. The seller describes it as very nice original, which is pretty rare for a car of this age. If you're into that vintage 70s vibe, this Pinto might just be your ticket to Nostalgia Town. With only 76,000 miles on the odometer, this wagon hasn't been run into the ground. It's currently on non-op status, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It might mean it's been stored safely for a while. The white paint gives it a clean, classic look. And being a wagon, it's got that extra bit of practicality that could make it a fun weekend cruiser or even a quirky daily driver. Now, I've got to keep it real with you. At $6,250, it's not exactly cheap for a Pinto. But if you're looking for a well-preserved piece of 70s Americana that stands out from the crowd, this could be your chance. Remember, folks, cars like these aren't just about getting from A to B. They're about the stories, the memories, and the double takes you'll get cruising down Main Street. If you're in the market for something unique and you've got a soft spot for underdogs, this 73 Pinto wagon might just be calling your name. 3. We're diving into a real 80s icon, a 1984 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $9,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't just any Trans Am. This one's got some serious muscle under the hood. First off, let's talk about that engine. The sellers swapped out the original 305 for a beefy 406 motor. That's a serious upgrade, folks. And if you're a purist, don't worry. The original engine is included in the sale price. Paired with a 5-speed manual transmission, this Trans Am is promising one heck of a thrilling ride. Now, here's the kicker. This beauty has only 44,000 miles on the clock. That's incredibly low for a car pushing 40 years old. The seller claims it's rust-free and has never seen a winter, which explains the low mileage and good condition. Speaking of condition, let's keep it real here. The seller mentions a crack in the dash, which is pretty common for cars of this era. But other than that, they say it's in good cosmetic condition. And here's some more good news. The AC blows cold. Anyone who's owned an 80s car knows how rare that is. The Trans Am comes with a clean title, which is always a plus. And with that 406 engine, you can bet it runs great, as the seller claims. Now, $9,000 might seem a bit steep at first glance, but consider this. You're getting a low-mileage, rust-free 80s icon with a performance upgrade and the original engine to boot. For the right enthusiast, that's a pretty sweet deal. Remember, folks, cars like these aren't just about getting from A to B. They're about reliving the glory days of American muscle, turning heads at car shows and feeling that rush every time you hit the gas. If you've got a soft spot for 80s muscle and you're looking for a project that's already in good shape, this 84 Trans Am might just be your ticket to automotive nirvana. 4. We're diving into a real piece of American automotive history, a 1966 Chrysler Newport that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $500. Now, let me tell you, this isn't a perfect showroom piece, but it's got potential written all over it. First off, we're looking at a 2-door hardtop with that classic 60s styling that just oozes cool. Under the hood, you've got a Chrysler 383 V8, a powerhouse of its time. It's paired with an automatic transmission, and it's got power steering and brakes, which were pretty fancy features back in '66. Now, I've got to keep it real with you folks. This Newport needs some love. The seller is upfront about it, suggesting you bring a trailer or a mechanic. It last hit the road in 2020, and while it runs, it needs a bit of help to get going. The odometer's broken, but the seller claims it's got 64,000 original miles. On the bright side, there's been some recent work done. We're talking rebuilt carb, new brakes, a new gas tank, and a new fuel pump. The seats have been reupholstered, which is a nice touch. The glass is all intact, and there are no dents, which is pretty impressive for a car this age. But here's the catch. It needs a battery and gas to get running. The speedometer's not working, and there's some minor rust to contend with. Also, keep in mind that this old girl uses lead additive for gas, so you'll need to factor that into your running costs. Now, $5,500 might seem a bit steep for a car that needs work, but consider this. You're getting a complete, largely original 60s Chrysler with a clear Wyoming title. For the right enthusiast, that's a solid foundation for a restoration project. Remember, folks, cars like these aren't just about getting from A to B. They're about preserving a piece of automotive history, the thrill of the restoration process, and the pride of bringing a classic back to life. If you've got the skills or the budget to give this Newport the TLC it needs, you could end up with a real head-turner. 5. We're diving into a real 80s muscle icon, a 1985 Chevrolet Monte Carlo SS that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $11,900. Now let me tell you, this isn't just any Monte Carlo. This is a genuine SS with the VIN to prove it. First off, let's talk about what's under the hood. We've got a 5.0 V8 305 engine, but this isn't your stock setup. The sellers added some serious upgrades with Holley headers and an Edelbrock carburetor. Pair that with a quick shifter and a speed shifter, and you've got a recipe for some serious performance. The seller says it runs and drives like a beast, and I'm inclined to believe them. Now, here's where I've got to keep it real with you folks. This Monte Carlo isn't a showroom perfect restoration. The seller's upfront about it needing some cosmetic work. We're talking paint, interior touch-ups, and a new headliner. But hey, that's part of the charm with these project cars, right? On the plus side, it's got good tires, a clean title in the seller's name, and current registration. With 82,000 miles on the clock, it's got some life experience, but it's not worn out by any means. Let's talk about that color, LA Dodger Blue. It might need a fresh coat, but that's a head-turning shade that'll look amazing when it's all polished up. Now, $11,900 might seem a bit steep for a car that needs some TLC, but remember, this is a genuine SS. These are getting harder to find, especially in running condition with some choice performance upgrades already installed. Here's the bottom line, folks. If you're looking for a turnkey show car, this might not be the one for you. But if you're an enthusiast who loves the idea of taking a solid runner with good bones and turning it into your dream machine, this Monte Carlo SS could be your ticket to 80s muscle car heaven. Remember, cars like these aren't just about getting from A to B. They're about the thrill of the restoration, the satisfaction of bringing a classic back to its former glory, and the pure joy of cruising in a piece of American automotive history. 6. We're diving into a true classic from the land yachts era, a 1979 Lincoln Continental Mark V that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $7,175. Now let me tell you, this isn't just any old boat. This is a well-preserved piece of American luxury. First off, let's talk about the condition. The seller claims this Continental has only 44,000 miles on the clock, which is incredibly low for a car that's over 4 decades old. They say it's been kept garaged for years, which explains why it's managed to stay in such good shape. The seller describes it as clean inside and out, which is music to our ears when we're talking about a car of this vintage. Now, let's talk about the features. We're looking at a leather interior, which was the height of luxury back in '79. The AC and stereo are mentioned, suggesting they're in working order. Remember, folks, finding a working AC in a car this old is like striking gold. The seller says it runs great, which is always good to hear. These Continentals came with big V8 engines, so when they're running well, they're smooth as silk. Just imagine cruising down the highway in this land yacht, feeling like you're floating on air. Now, I've got to keep it real with you. At $7,975, it's not exactly cheap for a 40-year-old car. But consider this. You're getting a low-mileage, well-preserved piece of American luxury history. These Mark IVs are becoming increasingly rare, especially in good condition. One thing to note, the seller doesn't mention much about the exterior condition or any recent mechanical work. It might be worth asking for more details and photos before making the trip to see it. Remember, folks, cars like these aren't just about getting from A to B. They're about making a statement, reliving the days when American luxury meant big, bold, and beautiful. If you've got a soft spot for 70s style and you're looking for a cruiser that'll turn heads wherever you go, this '79 Continental Mark V might just be your ticket to automotive nirvana. 7. We're diving into a real gem from the '80s, a 1984 Ford Mustang GT turbo convertible that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $9,500. Now let me tell you, this isn't your run-of-the-mill Mustang. This is a rare bird that's been part of the same family for nearly 3 decades. First off, let's talk about what makes this Mustang special. It's a GT turbo trim, which is a pretty rare find these days. We're looking at a 4-cylinder turbocharged engine paired with a 5-speed manual transmission, a combination that was quite the performer back in '84. The seller claims it's got matching numbers, which is always a big plus for collectors. Now here's where it gets interesting. This beauty started its life in sunny Palm Springs, California, before making its way to Vancouver Island in the mid-90s. It's been garage-kept and family-owned since then, which explains its impressive condition. Speaking of condition, the seller describes it as like new, with only 62,000 miles on the clock. However, they do mention the odometer is broken, so take that mileage with a grain of salt. But don't let that deter you. This Mustang is collector-plated, which is a good sign of its condition and historical value. The sellers put some work into it recently with new tires, brakes, and brake lines. They claim it's turnkey, ready to drive and enjoy, which is music to our ears. Now, I've got to keep it real with you. At $9,500, it's not exactly cheap for an '84 Mustang. But consider this. You're getting a rare GT turbo convertible with a known history, in apparently great condition, and ready to hit the road. For the right enthusiast, that's a pretty sweet deal. One thing to note, the seller doesn't mention much about the paint condition or any rust issues. Given its California origins and garage-kept life, it's probably in good shape, but it's always worth asking for more details and photos. Remember, folks, cars like these aren't just about getting from A to B. They're about reliving the glory days of 80s performance, turning heads at car shows, and feeling that rush every time you drop the top and hit the gas. If you've got a soft spot for Fox body Mustangs and you're looking for a rare convertible that's ready to cruise, this 84 GT Turbo might just be calling your name. 8. We're diving into a real gem from the late 70s, a 1979 Ford Ranchero that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $9,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average pickup. This is a bona fide garage find that's sure to turn some heads. First off, let's talk about what's under the hood. We're looking at a 302 V8 engine, which was a solid power plant back in the day, and still has plenty of grunt for cruising today. The seller mentions they've rebuilt the carburetor, which is always good news for these older engines. Now here's where it gets interesting. This Ranchero is described as a garage find, which usually means it's been tucked away for a while. The seller isn't sure how long it was stored, but that could explain why it's in such good shape. With only 71,500 miles on the clock, it's barely broken in by classic car standards. The seller's put some work into it recently. We're talking new ball joints and new tires, which are always good to see. And get this, the AC blows cold. Anyone who's owned a classic car knows how rare that is, especially for a vehicle from '79. Now I've got to keep it real with you. The seller describes the condition as excellent, but remember, that's a subjective term. It's always worth asking for more detailed photos and maybe even a video walk around before making the trip to see it. At $9,000, it's not exactly cheap for a '79 Ranchero. But consider this. You're getting a unique vehicle that combines the style of a car with the utility of a pickup. These Rancheros are getting harder to find, especially in good condition. One thing to note, the seller doesn't mention anything about rust or body condition. Given it's a garage find, it might be in better shape than most, but it's always worth asking about. Remember, folks, vehicles like these aren't just about getting from A to B. They're about owning a piece of automotive history, turning heads at car shows, and feeling that rush of nostalgia every time you hit the gas. If you've got a soft spot for unique classics, and you're looking for something that can haul more than just your heart, this '79 Ranchero might just be your ticket to automotive nirvana. 9. We're diving into a piece of American sports car history, a 1981 Chevrolet Corvette that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $2,500. Now let me tell you, this isn't a perfect showroom piece, but it's got some serious potential for the right buyer. First off, let's talk about what's under the hood. We're looking at a V8 engine, which is paired with a manual transmission, a combination that's sure to put a smile on any gearhead's face. The seller's done some recent work that's worth noting. They've swapped out the carburetor and distributor for pre-electronically controlled models, which could mean better reliability and easier maintenance. Now, here's where I've got to keep it real with you folks. This Corvette isn't without its flaws. The seller mentions a small amount of paint missing from the front bumper, and there's a rip in both the carpet and the seat. These are things you'll want to factor into your budget if you're looking to restore this beauty to its former glory. On the bright side, there's been some serious recent work done. We're talking new Cooper Cobra tires, a new clutch, air filter, fuel filter, ceramic spark plug wires, and spark plugs. That's a good chunk of maintenance taken care of right there. With 82,710 miles on the odometer, this Corvette has seen its fair share of road. But that's not necessarily a bad thing for a car that's pushing 40 years old. It means it's been driven and enjoyed, not just sitting in a garage collecting dust. Now, $10,500 might seem a bit steep given the cosmetic issues, but remember, these C3 Corvettes are becoming increasingly collectible. Plus, with the recent mechanical work, you're getting a car that's ready to hit the road. Here's the bottom line, folks. If you're looking for a turnkey show car, this might not be the one for you. But if you're an enthusiast who loves the idea of owning a piece of Corvette history and doesn't mind putting in a little elbow grease to make it shine, this '81 could be your ticket to sports car nirvana. 10. We're diving into a real piece of American automotive history, a 1973 Oldsmobile Delta 88 Royal convertible that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $9,500. Now let me tell you, this isn't just any old land yacht. This is a one-family-owned beast with some serious muscle under the hood. First off, let's talk about that engine. We're looking at a V8 Rocket 450i, which was a powerhouse in its day. These engines were known for their torque, making this Delta 88 a smooth cruiser perfect for those long summer drives with the top down. Now, here's where it gets interesting. This Olds has been in the same family for nearly 40 years. That's some serious dedication, folks. It suggests that this car has been loved and cared for, which is always a good sign when you're looking at a classic. The seller says it starts and drives, which is music to our ears when we're talking about a car that's pushing 50 years old. With 125,000 miles on the clock, it's got some life experience. But remember, these old American boats were built to last. Now I've got to keep it real with you. The seller describes the condition as good, but that's a pretty broad term when it comes to classic cars. They don't provide much detail about the body condition, interior state, or any recent mechanical work. It might be worth asking for more photos and details before making the trip to see it. At $9,500, it's not exactly cheap for a 73 Olds. But convertibles from this era are getting harder to find, especially in driving condition. Plus, with its long-term ownership history, you're potentially getting a car with a known past. Here's the bottom line, folks. If you're looking for a turnkey show car, this might not be the one for you. But if you're an enthusiast who loves the idea of cruising in a piece of 70s Americana and doesn't mind putting in a little TLC, this Delta 88 could be your ticket to convertible heaven. Remember, cars like these aren't just about getting from A to B. They're about the experience, the feel of the wind in your hair, the rumble of that big V8, and the admiring glances you'll get at every stoplight. As always, give it a thorough inspection before you buy. And if you do pick it up, don't forget to give us a wave as you cruise by with the top down. 11. We're diving into a real gem from the 60s. A 1965 Chevrolet Corvair that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $8,500. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average classic. This is a well-kept piece of automotive history that's sure to turn heads. First off, let's talk about what makes this Corvair special. We're looking at a 110 horsepower model with a 4-speed manual transmission. For those who don't know, the Corvair was Chevy's answer to the VW Beetle, with its rear-mounted air-cooled engine. It's a unique driving experience that you just can't get with modern cars. The seller claims this beauty has only 65,000 miles on the clock, which is impressively low for a car that's pushing 60 years old. They describe it as well-kept, which is always music to our ears when we're talking about classics. Now here's where it gets interesting. The seller mentions they've recently installed a new fuel pump and done some maintenance. That's good news for potential buyers because it means some of the typical old car issues might already be sorted out. The Corvair is described as being in excellent condition, which is pretty high praise for a car of this age. However, keep in mind that excellent can be subjective, so it's always worth asking for more detailed photos or a video walk-around if you're serious about buying. One thing to note, the seller says they must sell due to losing storage space. This could mean you might have some room to negotiate on the price, but don't lowball them too much. A well-kept Corvair is still a desirable classic. At $8,500, it's not the cheapest 65 Corvair you'll find, but if it's as well-maintained as the seller suggests, it could be a fair price for a turnkey classic that's ready to drive and enjoy. Remember, folks, cars like these aren't just about getting from A to B. They're about owning a piece of automotive history, turning heads at car shows, and experiencing a driving sensation that's truly unique. If you've got a soft spot for quirky classics and you're looking for something that stands out from the crowd, this 65 Corvair might just be your ticket to classic car nirvana. 12. We're diving into a real-time capsule, a 1984 Oldsmobile Delta 88 Royale that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $4,950. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average 80s land yacht. This is a one-owner, low-mileage gem that's sure to turn some heads. First off, Let's talk about those miles. This Delta 88 has only 29,344 miles on the clock. That's incredibly low for a car that's pushing 40 years old. It's been with a single owner since new, which often means it's been well cared for. Under the hood, we've got a 5.0 V8 engine paired with an automatic transmission. These old olds were known for their smooth ride, perfect for cruising and comfort. The seller says it runs good, which is always nice to hear about a car of this vintage. Now, let's talk about condition. The seller describes it as good and mentions that the interior is in great condition. That's not surprising given the low mileage, but it's still a big plus. They've also put in a new battery, which is one less thing for the new owner to worry about. However, I've got to keep it real with you folks. The seller mentions it'll need a smog check. That's something to factor into your plans if you're in an area with strict emissions laws. It might need a bit of work to pass depending on how long it's been sitting. At $4,850, it's not the cheapest 84-olds you'll find out there. But consider this. You're getting a car with incredibly low miles, one owner, and what sounds like a well-preserved interior. For the right enthusiast, that could be a steal. Remember, cars like these aren't just about getting from A to B. They're about preserving a piece of automotive history, cruising in style, and maybe even winning some trophies at local car shows. If you've got a soft spot for 80s American luxury, and you're looking for a low-mileage example that's ready to hit the road, this 84 Delta 88 might just be calling your name. 13. We're diving into a real gem from the 80s, a 1984 Chevrolet Camaro Z28 that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $5,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average third-gen Camaro. This is a low-mileage stock example that's sure to make any muscle car fan's heart race. First off, let's talk about what's under the hood. We're looking at the 5.0 high-output V8 engine, which was a pretty potent power plant for its time. Paired with an automatic transmission, this Z28 is ready to cruise or show off at the stoplight. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The seller claims this Camaro has only 53,000 miles on the clock. That's incredibly low for a car that's pushing 40 years old. They describe it as completely stock, which is music to the ears of collectors and purists alike. The seller says it runs and drives very nicely, and they're calling it turnkey ready. That's always good to hear about a classic car. They also mention that it's fully loaded and all the options work, which can be rare for a car of this vintage. Now I've got to keep it real with you. The seller describes the condition as excellent, but remember, that's a subjective term. They do mention that the interior is nice for its age, which suggests it's not perfect, but still in good shape. The glass is described as perfect, which is a plus. At $5,000, it's priced pretty competitively for a low-mileage, stock Z28. These third-gen Camaros are starting to gain traction in the collector market, especially clean, original examples like this one seems to be. One thing to note, the seller doesn't want emails, so you'll need to call or text if you're interested. Also, they don't mention anything about rust or body condition, so that's something you'll want to check out in person. Remember, folks, cars like these aren't just about getting from A to B. They're about reliving the glory days of 80s muscle, turning heads at car shows, and feeling that rush every time you hit the gas. If you've got a soft spot for third-gen Camaros, and you're looking for a stock, low-mileage example, this 84 Z28 might just be calling your name. 14. We're diving into a real piece of American automotive history, a 1964 Chevrolet Corvair Monza that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $6,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't a perfect showroom piece, but it's got potential written all over it. First off, let's talk about what makes this Corvair special. We're looking at a two-door coupe with that unique horizontally opposed, air-cooled six-cylinder engine in the rear. It's paired with a 4-speed manual transmission, which is always fun in these quirky classics. This isn't the turbocharged version, but that just means it's easier to maintain. The seller claims this Monza has only 54,469 miles on the clock, which isn't bad for a car pushing 60 years old. They've put on some new tires with 0 miles and a new battery, which is a good start for any project car. Now I've got to keep it real with you folks. This Corvair needs some love. The seller's upfront about it needing floorboard and interior work, which is pretty common for cars of this age. The white paint you see isn't original. It was originally burgundy with a red interior. That could be a fun restoration project if you're into that sort of thing. On the bright side, the body is described as straight, and the chrome is intact. That's a good foundation to work with. The engine cranks, which is always a positive sign, but the seller does mention it needs TLC. At $6,000, it's not the cheapest 64 Corvair you'll find out there, especially considering the work it needs. But remember, these cars are becoming increasingly rare and collectible. If you're handy with a wrench and have a passion for unique classics, this could be a rewarding project. One thing to note, it's not currently registered, but the seller has a clear title. You'll need to factor in the cost of getting it road legal again. Remember, folks, cars like these aren't just about getting from A to B. They're about preserving a piece of automotive history, the satisfaction of a restoration project, and the thrill of driving something truly unique. If you've got a soft spot for underdogs and you're looking for a project car that'll turn heads at cruise nights, this 64 Corvair Monza might just be calling your name. 15. We're diving into a real piece of American muscle car history. A 1966 Ford Mustang that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $14,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average 66 Stang. This is a C-Code V8 with some serious upgrades. First off, let's talk about what's under the hood. While it's not the original engine, we're looking at a 302 V8 from the 70s, paired with a 4-barrel carb and electronic ignition. That's a solid power plant that should give this pony plenty of giddy-up. The C4 3-speed automatic has been rebuilt, which is always good news. Now here's where it gets interesting. The seller's done some serious work on this Mustang. We're talking a Burgess power steering conversion, which should make this classic a breeze to drive. They've also rebuilt the front suspension with a Shelby drop for improved handling. That's a nice touch for anyone who likes to carve corners. Safety-wise, they've added a bolt-in roll bar, 3-point retractable seat belts, and high-back seats from a '69 Mustang. That's some thoughtful upgrading right there. But if you're a purist, don't worry. They've kept the original console, body trim pieces, and rear seat if you want to take it back to stock. The seller describes it as a super solid CA car, which is music to our ears. California cars often have less rust than their counterparts from wetter climates. They've also replaced the windshield and fuel tank and added a new headliner. Now, I've got to keep it real with you. The odometer shows 10,000 miles, but it's rolled over, so the true mileage is unknown. That's pretty common for cars of this age, but it's something to keep in mind. At $14,000, it's not the cheapest '66 Mustang out there, but considering the work that's been done and the upgrades, it could be a fair price for the right buyer. Plus, it's got those cool old black and gold California plates. Remember, folks, cars like these aren't just about getting from A to B. They're about owning a piece of automotive history, feeling the rumble of that V8, and turning heads wherever you go. If you've got a soft spot for first-gen Mustangs and you're looking for one that's been thoughtfully upgraded, this 66 might just be calling your name. 16. We're diving into a real gem from the 80s, a 1982 Cadillac Eldorado that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $7,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average old caddy. This is a low-mileage, well-maintained piece of American luxury that's sure to turn heads. First off, let's talk about those miles. This Eldorado has only 30,000 original miles on the clock. That's incredibly low for a car that's pushing 40 years old. It's been garage kept and meticulously taken care of by the seller's grandfather, which explains its fantastic condition. Under the hood, we've got that classic Cadillac V8 engine paired with an automatic transmission and front-wheel drive, a setup that was pretty innovative for its time. The seller mentions a recent tune-up, including new plugs, wires, filters, and a full synthetic oil change. That's music to any buyer's ears. Now here's where it gets interesting. This Eldorado has been sitting in the garage since 2018, but don't let that scare you off. The seller says the AC still blows cold, and all the power windows, locks, and cruise control are working. They've even upgraded the stereo, so you can cruise in style with your favorite tunes. The seller describes the condition as like new, which is pretty impressive for a car of this vintage. They've got all the service records and manuals, which is a huge plus for collectors and enthusiasts alike. Now, I've got to keep it real with you. The seller does mention that the headliner is starting to sag a bit. That's pretty common in cars of this age, and it's a relatively easy fix if you want to tackle it. At $7,000, it's not the cheapest 82 Eldorado you'll find out there. But consider this. You're getting a low-mileage, well-maintained example with a known history and recent maintenance. For the right enthusiast, that could be a steal. 17. We're diving into a real gem from the late 60s, a 1969 Lincoln Mark III that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $13,150. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average classic. This is a well-maintained, upgraded piece of American luxury that's sure to turn heads wherever it goes. First off, let's talk about the condition. The seller describes it as excellent, and they're not just throwing that word around. This Mark III got a repaint about 7 years ago on what they claim is a rust-free body. That's a big deal for a car of this vintage. Under the hood, we've got that big block V8 engine that Lincoln was famous for. The seller says it's smooth and has a lot of acceleration. Music to any classic car lover's ears. They've upgraded to a dual exhaust system, which not only sounds great, but might give you a little extra power too. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The seller mentions they've rebuilt the transmission and checked and updated all components. That's the kind of maintenance that can make the difference between a showpiece and a real driver. Speaking of driving, they say it's never let them down in 3 years of cruising to events. That's the kind of reliability you want in a classic. With 93,653 miles on the odometer, this Mark III has seen some life, but it's still got plenty of road ahead of it. The seller mentions they've invested well over $20,000 in improvements, and they've got the records to prove it. Now, I've got to keep it real with you. At $13,750, it's not the cheapest $69 Mark III you'll find out there. But consider this. You're getting a well-maintained, upgraded example with a known history and recent improvements. For the right enthusiast, that could be a steal. Remember, folks, cars like these aren't just about getting from A to B. They're about cruising in style, turning heads at car shows, and reliving the days when American luxury meant big, bold, and beautiful. If you've got a soft spot for late 60s Lincolns and you're looking for a well-preserved example that's ready to hit the road, this 69 Mark III might just be calling your name. 18. We're diving into a real gem from the 60s, a 1964 Ford Galaxie 500 that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $15,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average old Ford. This is a time capsule on wheels that's sure to make any vintage car lover weak in the knees. First off, let's talk about what's under the hood. We're looking at a 5.7L 3552 V8 engine paired with an automatic transmission. That's a solid power plant that should give this big beauty plenty of get up and go. The seller claims it's all stock, which is music to the ears of purists and collectors alike. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The seller is absolutely gushing about this Galaxie's condition, describing it as next to perfect, both inside and out. They say there's no rust, which is pretty rare for a car pushing 60 years old. Even the AM radio is said to be working. How's that for a blast from the past? With 84,184 miles on the odometer, this Galaxie has seen some life, but it sounds like it's been well maintained. The seller mentions it has like-new tires, which is always a plus. Now I've got to keep it real with you. At $15,000, it's not the cheapest 64 Galaxie you'll find out there. But consider this. You're getting what sounds like a well-preserved, all-original example that's ready to hit the road. For the right enthusiast, that could be a fair price. One thing to note, the seller's enthusiasm is great, but it's always wise to verify claims of perfection in person. A thorough inspection is still a must, even for a car that sounds this good. Remember, folks, cars like these aren't just about getting from A to B. They're about cruising in style, turning heads at car shows, and reliving the golden age of American automobiles. If you've got a soft spot for 60s Fords and you're looking for a well-preserved example that's ready to hit the road, This 64 Galaxy 500 might just be calling your name. 19. We're diving into a classic beauty that's up for grabs on Craigslist, a 1972 Buick Skylark. This sleek coupe is a real head-turner, and it could be yours for just $15,000. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. The seller reports that this Skylark is in good condition, which is always a plus when you're dealing with a car that's been around for over 5 decades. It's got a clean title, so you won't have to worry about any legal hassles. Under the hood, you'll find a new Buick Crate 350 engine, complete with a cam and headers for that extra bit of oomph. Paired with a Rocket 350 transmission, this Skylark is ready to hit the road with power and style. The front disc brakes provide reliable stopping power while the new tires ensure a smooth ride. The odometer shows 47,933 miles, but here's the catch. It's rolled over, so while the car may look like it's got low mileage, it's likely seen a bit more action than that. But hey, that's just part of the charm of owning a classic car, right? The gray paint job gives this Buick a sleek, understated look that's sure to turn heads wherever you go. And with LED headlights, you'll have no trouble seeing the road ahead, even on the darkest of nights. Now I've got to be straight with you. The seller doesn't mention anything about the interior or any potential rust issues. So if you're serious about making this Skylark your own, you'll want to take a closer look and maybe even bring along a mechanic friend to give it a once-over. All in all, this 1972 Buick Skylark seems like a solid choice for anyone looking to add a classic car to their collection. With its good condition, new engine, and stylish looks, it's got a lot to offer. Just remember, with any classic car, there may be some hidden surprises, so be sure to do your due diligence before making a final decision. 20. We've got a real treat for you, a 1966 Ford Galaxy 500 XL that's up for grabs on Craigslist. This classic beauty is priced at $13,800, and let me tell you, it's worth every penny. First off, can we just take a moment to appreciate the fact that this Galaxy is mostly all original? That's right, folks. This car is a true time capsule. The interior and paint were redone about 3 years ago, but everything else is as authentic as it gets. Speaking of the paint, the seller mentions that it's a custom color, and boy, does it look stunning. The photos don't do it justice. You've got to see this car in person to truly appreciate the craftsmanship that went into the paint job. Now, let's talk about what's under the hood. This Galaxy is powered by the original 390 V8 engine, which is paired with a Cruise-O-Matic transmission. The seller reports that the car runs perfectly and is very smooth and strong. That's the kind of reliability you want in a classic car, and this Galaxy delivers. The odometer shows just 16,000 miles, which is incredibly low for a car of this age. However, it's worth noting that the seller doesn't specify whether this is the original mileage or if the odometer has rolled over. Either way, based on the car's overall condition, it's clear that it's been well maintained throughout its life. The seller has owned the car since 2018 and only drives it once every couple of months, which explains why it's in such great shape. The car comes with a clean title in the seller's name, and the tags are good until September 2025, so you won't have to worry about any paperwork hassles. Now, I know what you're thinking. $13,800 is a lot of money for a car that's over 50 years old. But hear me out. This Galaxy is a rare find. It's not every day that you come across a classic car that's in such great condition, both inside and out. Plus, with its original engine and transmission, this car is a true collector's item. Of course, as with any used car purchase, it's always a good idea to get a professional inspection before making a final decision. But based on the seller's description and the photos provided, this 1966 Ford Galaxy 500 XL seems like a solid investment for any classic car enthusiast.